Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVeigh, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. And today we are speaking with Carr.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for having me
Thank
here.
you, thank you so much for hanging out with me for a little while. I'm very excited to get to know you. Um, and if you wouldn't mind, could you just share a little bit about yourself and a little background?
Yeah, so I'm an author and I work in the realms of dreams, death, and divination. And what can I say? I've penned a few books on dreaming specifically. And I'm also a death doula. So I help people at end of life who are dying or going through the dying process, but I also help support family members too. So a death doula is a person who holds space with compassion through all the realms of death, supporting people psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, if that's within someone's framework, and also practically, in practical ways. So, organizing memorials, funeral services. I'm an ordained minister. I'm not really like a minister. I identify as a witch, so I suppose I'm more like high priestess, but I do facilitate memorials, funerals, and hand fastings and that sort of thing too.
Wow.
And then in the realms of divination, this is, going into the realms of all of these exceptional experiences of consciousness, which include mediumship, clairvoyancy, psychopomp work, and being able to guide people through, the bigger picture questions and anything that involves, future, future stuff, past stuff,
Okay.
anything really to guide people. So I'm a tarot, I guess a tarot scholar really, because I teach master classes in the Rider Waite tarot deck. So that's usually the go-to point where people book in sessions with me with tarot, and that's usually when other messages come through, either through the realms of mediumship or just intuitive, just picking up on whatever's there for the person. Um, I do sessions I call soul spa sessions in London, that are a deep dive really for an hour with clients that really open up the space for taking care of their soul needs really. And so that includes, healing, sound healing and clearings, and just opening up intuitive channels for messages to come through. And then of course a little bit of tarot, because tarot is like a nice talking point because they're pictorial images that it helps people sort of process things a little bit more because they're very visual. And yeah, so that's pretty much the zones that I work in: dreams, death, divination. And they all seem
Sounds,
to help each other out because they're all liminal spaces. They're all realms that hold great mystery and also exceptional experiences of consciousness too. So a lot of people feel that they have these experiences within the realms of dreams, death, or what would be called paranormal. So those are the zones, and I've been interested in these zones since I was a little kid.
yeah, that's a lot that you're sharing. That's quite a lot. Yeah, I was going to ask you what in the world got you interested in all of this in the first place?
Yeah, it's funny because life is a funny thing. It's not as though you seek out these things to, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. I'm going to this is going to be on my resume. It's something that you feel like you get pulled into or called into, and it usually starts at a young age. And it was one of those things where I never really like knew what I was going to be when I grew up. I knew I was a creative person and probably work in the arts, which I did. Worked in music industry for a long time, film industry. And these experiences that I had when I was a child, and then all through my teenage years, all through my 20s and 30s as well. I'm, kissing 50 now, so even through my 40s, I was able to, to connect the dots between all of these things and realize like, wow, the universe is really pulling me into like these roles. And it wasn't until I was like the age of 40 that where I really stepped out and started to guide people and help people. But
Mm.
before that, I worked on it like in my own way, in my own practice. But my first experiences of consciousness were at a very young age, where I was having astral projections and lucid dreaming, very young. I have a very, very deep memory. I have memories of being in my crib, and some of
Wow.
my earliest memories were flying through space and stars. And every night was this sort of experience of like this cosmic experience. And I have more memories of those experiences than I do of the mundane, banal, like everyday stuff, like playing with my toys and stuff like that. So that's when it all first started. I had an awareness as a little kid. And then I had a near-death experience at the age of 4, which really helped set the stage, I think. Which that was a real initiation of sorts, where I nearly drowned, and I was pulled out by a sneaker wave in South Carolina, and had like my little life flash before my eyes really quickly, and had this sort of sense and acceptance of death, and this boundary dissolving feeling of oneness, and feeling of well, I guess that's it. And also a deep sadness and empathy for my family too, like just this knowing like, well, they'll never find my body, and just, oh, I feel sad for them.
Wow.
This
At
this
4.
real, yeah, this really interesting, you never forget these things,
You're
right?
thinking these things, such compassion at 4 years old and empathy. That's amazing.
Yeah, and more concerned for them than like, oh, me being swept out. So, and these sort of experiences, a near-death experience, and anyone listening here who's had any brush with death, you never forget it, and it was really defining. And thankfully, I was still tethered to this earth, and my dad had seen this whole event unfold of me being pulled out to sea, and he came and rescued me, got me out, and brought me to the beach. Of course, I'm in shock. And the first thing he does is take a photo of me.
Really? How
Yeah.
do you know why? Did he say
Well,
why?
I asked years later. At the time, I was like, is he trying to distract me? Is trying to make me laugh, do something funny? It was years later, when I asked him, when I was a teenager, I got the picture here in my office. Like, why did you take this photo of me? And he said, it was because your eyes, they really changed.
Really?
They
Wow.
look very different. And like, you could see it, I've
They
seen.
look, well, to me, kind of sad and almost like been through a lot already.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
in your
it's
little,
like, oh, I've, like old soul, instant old soul there because of looking into the faces of death or whatever. And my
right?
dad said
Wow.
it also was just a moment he wanted to capture, I was saved.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
eyes changed. But so, that was sort of
Interesting.
initiations of sorts.
Wow.
Shortly after that, about a year later, my grandfather died. And he was in his 60s, so he wasn't that old, and it was a shock to the family. And he was my Scottish grandpa. um and when my mom told me about his death, I had this really strange sense of calm. I felt like I understood it. I was like, yeah, yeah, mom, I know, I understand that. Like, it was strange. It was like, how parents sort of like, they're
Right.
very careful of how they word things to a 5-year-old, to a young child. But I
Of
felt
course.
very much like, this is strange. I feel like I know what that is. And I think that having that experience when I was 4, helped me. And then as I was a teenager, I started getting a lot more like exceptional experiences, paranormal psychic experiences started to get really activated. So the astral projections started happening more, and my psychic dreaming just went through the roof, and psychic prompts and intuition
Wow.
started happening quite a bit. And at that time, I became very much immersed in learning all I could about these experiences. So I, was this is pre-internet, right? So this is like in the
Yeah.
80s,
Yeah.
1980. 1980, 6, 87, 88, 89, and going to the library and would study as much as I could on anything to do with these esoteric arts, as they would be called. And that was really helpful in my exploration. And I started to trust and not feel afraid of these experiences. But of course, I kept them in the closet because, I tried to talk to a few people about this sort of thing, and they just go, that doesn't exist. You're
Right.
imagining it and shutting it down. And I'd be like, oh, I can't
Yeah,
share
I was
these
going to ask you
experiences.
if you had anyone in your family or close to you to talk to about these experiences. I mean, did you wonder, oh, are other people having these similar experiences?
You know what? My parents are great, and I've shared experiences with them before, and they're like, "Oh, wow, tell us more." They're really open. And in fact, both my parents have had dreams where they really sensed something or predicted something. And my
Mm,
dad prolifically had like one experience where he was having visions with his eyes open one day of like fire all around his eyes and a splitting headache, and he had to lay down because it was so intense. And the very next day, our house burned down. We were in the house when the fire happened, and we all had to
wow.
escape, and we lost everything. So he had this psychic vision the day before. And so I think it's, my folks, I can easily talk to them about this sort of thing, because they've had these exceptional experiences as well. But I'm speaking more about friends, you know,
Yeah.
friends at the time, or just, who have more reductionist views of reality. We're just like, that's crazy, that doesn't exist. So I learned like, oh, I should just keep these sort of things to myself. And there's no point in telling people too, because I don't need to impress anybody. So these things happen. So I started to explore it more, like, well, why are they happening then? And like, is this for a reason? Like, should I be helping in some kind of way? So
Mhm.
as I grew through my life, I started to connect the dots between a lot of things. So if I would have like a dream that felt very precognitive, I would get in touch with the person that it feels like it was, that was about or for. I wouldn't say like I had a dream that this thing happened. I would just make sure they were within my reach in order for me to help. Hey, checking in, how you doing? So I started to get it, like you have these sort of dreams or these prompts, then you just reach out and you help. You don't
Mhm.
have to scare people. You don't have to, in fact, don't do that. Don't scare people, because people can hold a lot of fear around it. But I just make sure I'm there. But I started having these experiences where the universe made sure I was there anyway. So I started to have these experiences as a teenager, especially around death, that felt like I'd be in the right place right when something was happening, when someone needed help. Now, it first started off with like having my best friend when I was a teenager. Her father was dying of got prognosis of terminal cancer, so it felt as though I was there for her during all that painful time of her father dying at home. And then all around that time too, my mom and my Scottish granny were always going to funerals. They were those type of women. And we're always like, there's a death in the family or death with friends, we will go and we will support. And I was like, can I come too? I was like 15,
Wow.
16, 17. I just felt really compelled, like I really want to be around that as well. So I went to lots of wakes and funerals, even if I didn't know the people, like viewing bodies and things like that. In fact, as a child, when I was a little kid, when my grandfather died, when I was 5, he had an open wake funeral. And I remember being up there and just like holding his hand in the casket, and my older relatives going, don't touch, you can't do that. But I just felt really, comfortable around that sort of, the reality of death. But then what ended up happening was all these weird synchronistic events started around the age of 17, where I was always in like a public place and something happened, like someone got in a car accident right in front of me. Someone's been knocked off of their bike in front of me. Someone's had a seizure right at my feet. Like a lot, like about, 3 or 4 times a year. to the point where it became a long running joke with all my friends, like, Tree, are you some kind of witch or something? Because every time we go out, someone's like falling over and passing out, or like, getting hit by a bus, trapped under the bus. But the thing is, when that happens, I'm the first person to just jump in and go, are you okay? And like call 911 and do CPR and just hold space and keep them calm while their arm is broken, or their ribs are crushed, and or they're bleeding profusely. So these sort of things happening a lot. So some of the situations are so crazy of how I am like physically in the right place, like including one situation where I was walking down Carnaby Street in London, and very busy street in London, and a man was in front of me, and he just stopped like dead in his tracks, and then proceeded to fall backwards onto me, into my arms, and I caught him, obviously, and he went down full dead weight, and I was like, what is going on? And then I just noticed that he had a syringe that was sticking out of his arm, and he had like literally shot heroin right in the middle of the street and proceeded to overdose. And I just happened to be the one to catch him and call 999, or is it
911.
and here, over here it's
Yeah. Over there, it might be something different.
It's some other thing. And yeah, his life was saved. The paramedic team straight away. And I've got so many stories like that where I'm literally like there. And this was happening from the age of 17, all through my 20s, all through my 30s. And then in my 40s, again, happening. And what really got me stepping in the death doula role was this one experience where it happened again. And I must have been just 40, 41. And this man was struggling on the street, like collapsed. I was like right behind him again, just there. And he went down, he's having a cardiac arrest. And we all tried desperately to save his life with CPR and calling the emergency services. Of course, they take so long, like 20 minutes. And it doesn't take long for someone to pass away with cardiac. But I just knew, his head was in my lap. I was holding his hands, and I was like, I just knew he was going to pass. And in fact, his eyes were wide open and transfixed, looking up at the sky as if he could see something. And I was just saying, it's going to be okay. You're not alone. You're not alone. And just tears just streaming down his face, and his last breath just gone, and just felt the shift and just went, oh. And it was just such an intense experience. And his family had been ahead of him. They didn't realize he had fallen back. And several minutes later, after he passed, there on the street, these women came running and screaming, and they were like, "Dad, Dad!" And it was his daughter, his 13-year-old daughter, his wife, and his mom. And within minutes, they had been walking ahead. They thought Dad was, looking, window shopping, and gone. And I stayed with them. I held them, I hugged them. I was with them all afternoon. His mother was distraught, saying, it should have been me. I'm old. It should have been me. It was really intense. And I just kept thinking, why do I always end up in these situations where there's people under duress, close to death, or in great fear of dying, and I happen to be there? And so I decided to consult my dreams, because I do a lot of dream work. I was like, enough is enough. This has been happening for years, decades. So I just, and when it's a death, it really hits you, even though you can still hold space for it. So I was feeling like, am I a jinx? It's me. And I decided to ask my dreams, please show me, because this is really like kind of giving me a complex here. So I went to sleep. As I was waking up, I was in the hypnopompic state, which is like a really great liminal zone to receive messages. And I got a quick succession of all of the times through my life of these moments, and like a connect the dot situation. And then a real sort of slap in the face by the universe, saying, you're meant to be stepping into this role. Like you're there at these moments because this is what you're meant to be doing. I was like, what? I'm like, but I'm not, it's not a paramedic. And I'm like, I'm there in an emotional support kind of way. That's what
Right.
I've been doing. So I decided, well, I got to look this up. Is there that role? Like, so I just typed into Google emotional support at death, because that's all I could figure out what I was
Well, I mean,
doing.
when I think of that, I think of hospice care, you know, a hospice
Yeah.
nurse, of course. I would think maybe they are gifted in those ways.
Yeah. So one of the first pages that came up after Googling emotional support at death was the death doulas and the training program here in the UK, by Living Well, Dying Well with the Crossfields Institute. So I went to the page and I read the description of what a death doula is. And I was like, it's me. I was like buzzing, like I was buzzing with energy, like resonating, going, ah, eureka. And I just signed up straight away and, never looked back.
Wow.
And you know what, though? Julie? The experiences have not stopped. Just because been a certified doula for quite a few years now, I still have these experiences. So I
I'm,
still get it about 3 to 4 times a year, except that now I know, like, okay, universe, I'm here at the right time, the right place.
yeah,
So
I'm so curious. What does it take to become a death doula? And what does, or do you work for a company?
So I'm a solo practitioner. I do volunteer at hospice. So I do have, I go in and out like of hospice as well, because with hospice it's different. They want palliative care nurses because it's all about the medicalization of the end of life care, which is fantastic. The hospice movement, the palliative care movement makes sure that people are physically comfortable and there's pain control and everyone feels, you're not in pain. A lot of people are really afraid of physical pain at end of life and when they're dying, of course. But what happens is a lot of people don't realize is there's tremendous emotional turmoil, psychological pain and turmoil, and spiritual distress at end of life, people facing the dark night of the soul and a sense of ego death, ego
Mm,
disillusion, and identity loss. And this is more
huge.
painful.
Yeah.
It's huge. So this is where death doulas can step in and offer this compassionate, guidance through the terrains of the dark night of the soul when someone's given a prognosis or when someone is
Mhm.
end of life. And so we hold space for that with person-centered compassion, active listening, and holding space for a person. And so that's where we're missing with the modern westernized
Mhm.
medical thing. We need to fill in that niche, and family members did do that role, for centuries, where the women of families pulled into that role. But now death is so sanitized and taboo and medicalized and behind closed curtains, and we have a disconnect. So
Yes.
part of being a death doula is bringing back that human
Mm,
person-centered approach and bringing back that that intimacy there.
yes.
So
Can I ask you, so to get the certificate, I'm just curious, how long did that take? What was that like?
it's like a 3-year process. There's like 3 different levels to move through. There's quite a bit of writing to do, like case reports to do as well. Portfolio to hand in at the end, case studies. But it's a
Mm,
wonderful process with the training because you face your own views of death in the process. There's
yeah.
a lot of modules of self-care as well, how to self-care and take care of yourself as a doula so you don't sponge in everybody's grief and that you're not
Right.
becoming completely immersed in the heaviness of the situation.
Right. Um,
So quite
um,
good.
if you could, I'm also very curious if you could touch upon how you became your own dream interpreter. Where did you take classes? Is that just with a bunch of reading that you've
Yeah,
done
so
over
with
the years?
reading, yeah, I created, when I was a teenager, I created like a little practice for myself for lucid dreaming. that I would engage in all the time, and just became normal. Like, oh, I just do this. And I had a best friend as well in high school. His name was Ren, and he died in 2016. And he was my buddy, my dreaming buddy. And so we would compare notes, and we didn't even know the term lucid dream. We'd just be like, those dreams where you're like awake in the dream. Like we didn't even know the term. And we had had a lot of that going on, and we had a lot of mutual and shared dreams too. And so I just stepped out. I stepped out as a dreaming guide, exactly around the same time as the death doula thing. Everything sort of collated at that time in my life. And it was really interesting because I had this sort of revelation that I needed to start to share my dream journal excerpts on social media. And I was like, why should I do that? That seems completely weird. I'm a kind of an introvert, and why would I want to share this? And it was like, trust me, you need to do this. So I started to do that, sharing my more exceptional experiences, like with out of body and precognition and lucid dreams. And people just started messaging me saying, I used to have this as a kid. I want to do it again. Oh, I thought that I was the only one having this. And so many people getting in touch, so much happening in terms of going back and forth, that I decided that, I should just do a workshop, and people will just come in one place and chat about it, instead of, so many people meeting, saying, can we meet up for coffee? And I had a few people that I would meet up once a week for coffee, and all these sort of things, just, it got very busy. So that's how it started, and I never looked back. And then wrote several books on the topic as well. And so this is just, not something that I studied in university or got a degree over. It was just been through personal experiences for over 35 years of
Right.
working with my own dreams, and just, that's how it's
and I am going to want to know about those books. I mean, maybe you can share that. I'll put links in the description. I want people to be able to get a hold of your books and how they can connect with you. And I still have more questions. We still have a little bit more time, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but don't forget to share, the names. Do you have your books handy?
Yeah, I've got them all on my desk.
Oh, cool. Well, let's just see them now. I'm curious.
Okay, so my first book is Dreams: How to Connect with Your Dreams to Enrich Your Life. And it's a great book just for starting. So there's a lot of great sort of tips and guidance on how you can start a dreaming practice, along with working with different plants, because I work with plants and herbs that help to activate dream states. And also, like, I'm currently studying, I'm back in school again, a course on transpersonal psychology with psychedelics and altered states. So I work a lot with various plants for healing modules. And the second book is Conscious Dreamer, which is a 30-day interactive journal, which is also fun too. I always try to make things fun.
Gosh, yeah, beautiful.
Creative and fun. So tap into, like, the childlike side. And
yes,
after 30 days, maybe you'll, like, find something deeper there, and possibly lucid dream. And then another one I worked on is called The Artist Oracle. And this one, I worked with 30 different artists and their dreams. They all chose a dream.
Wow.
And then they created an artwork of their dream, and I interpreted their dreams, and we've turned their dreams into oracle cards, like a deck.
Wow, so cool.
Yeah, so when you grab one of the cards from the deck, you could refer to the book, and then you find the meaning of the dream, and the dream guides you for the day.
That is so interesting. I haven't seen anything quite like that.
I know, it was so fun to do. I was like, hey, I've got this idea. Let's do it. Because I love
cool.
art.
You're so creative. I want to hear you play too. No, we don't have time for that, but maybe. Yeah. So is it okay if I ask, do you have a guide? Have you met a spiritual guide during these outings?
Yeah, I've had various guides come in through the years. And one thing I've been taught since I was little is don't get too attached to these guides
Mm,
because they will come and go and different ones will come for whatever you need. And in fact, don't get so hung up with their names or anything,
mm,
you know, like trying to project something onto them, like an identity onto them.
interesting.
And so that was, I was taught that very early on, that they will come and go and there'll be different ones. And so I've had different ones, and some have given me names, some of them have been really like quite clear visually. Other ones I went through a phase where there was no names. They would just appear as like little orbs, like they look like fireflies. And I had quite a few years where they were coming around quite a bit, and they would give me prompts around about people, and they would get my attention, and I'd be like, okay, tune in, and then
Mm.
and then I would receive something. So
So,
they would come around.
so these are guides that you've not just met when you're in an out of body experience or lucid dream, but in the physical. Have you
Oh
seen them as well?
yeah, seeing them with my own bare
It's
eyes. And
right.
in fact, when I first started seeing them, I was like, "There's something wrong with my eyes. I got to go to the doctor."
Oh,
Like so, because I'm quite rational, science too. Like you wouldn't believe it, but I am. But I was like, I better go check this out, And I was like, but part of me was like, this feels kind of paranormal, but I should really just go get my eyes checked out. So I got a really thorough eye examination, like looking for detached retinas, everything. And then also went for 2 MIR brain scans. I went through for EEGs and everything, just like to
wow.
see if it wasn't, I got like the whole works done. And then also that got this letter after, this whole nearly 8-month process of going through all these
Oh
tests,
my goodness.
a discharge from, Whitechapel Hospital Neurological Department. Can't find anything wrong with you. So we're discharging you from the unit because there's nothing. So I remember getting the day I got that, I was like, okay, I've covered all the bases. There's nothing physically wrong with me, yet I see these lights, they come. So I'm reading this letter and I just say out loud, all right, so if it's not my eyes and it's not my brain, then hey, what is this? Is this something else? And as soon as I said that, right, I was on my bed, right at the end of the bed, one of the orbs appeared at the end of my
Wow.
bed. And it's so funny when miracles happen like that, you you know you you still are like, you can't believe it, right? So after like cussing profusely, like what the after that, I just started crying because I
Oh,
realized, like, wow, I didn't trust it. And here I'm getting a really clear message. I was like, okay, what is it? And they're like, hello.
yeah.
And I was just like, I cried because I was like, oh, why didn't I trust? That's so, thank you. And but also, oh, I feel
Yeah.
bad that I didn't trust. And then I started laughing. Then anyone who would have like been a fly on a wall in that situation, they would have went, right, get this chick, get her into a straitjacket and throw her into the lead. But I was just like, then I was so full of joy, I was like, okay, this is cool. I trust this now. And so then
Yeah.
after that, when they would appear, I'd be like, okay, cool, like thumbs up. I'm going to tune into this person, or I'm going to listen. And
Mhm.
sometimes they would appear too if I'm just thinking about someone. So I'll just be doing something and someone will cross my mind, and then the orb will just come and I'll be like, right, I'll get in
Hmm.
touch with them. I'll give them a call to see how they're doing.
Wow.
The orbs also have even appeared when I'm like in an argument with my partner, like, getting stuck in my ego going, yeah, but you forgot to pay that bill, and getting
Oh,
wound up. And then they start appearing around, and I go, oh, right, I'm sorry, I just lost it there. Like, so they bring me back down too.
wow.
So yeah, so I had a phase in my life where they were coming around quite a bit. Um, and they, again, I was like, I don't get too attached because that's not what this is about. They're not gods. Attachment is really not good, because that's obstructive. So I learned to just be like, whenever they come, and not feel like needy for them, just feel grateful for them. So, and I haven't seen them for a while now, but I'm not.
One's going to show up.
Yeah. So I'm not like going, oh no, is there something wrong with me now?
Right.
I just accept that some guides come in for a phase and then other ones come in. So I've the last 18 months, I have kind of like a new set of guides.
Oh.
One's a deceased person, and with the deceased person has like this shaman with them as well, that is part of my like little guidance system. And I was actually given a name of the shaman. It was funny because I never really get names, but I was given a name. It sounded like a different language. And I Googled the name actually, because I was like, this is so unusual. And I Googled the name and I found out that this particular name is used in India for shamans. It's like a shamanic word for, so it's of India origin, which is interesting. So yeah, they come and go in different forms, appear in dreams, appear in meditations, and also in sessions too. I don't call upon them very much. I just sort of keep it quite open. I try not to, bother them. I'm just like, come in when I need to learn something. So
how much of what you do can be learned? Can it be taught? Certainly lucid dreaming, I know, is taught, and out of body. What about some of these other things, some of the clairvoyance that you have? Can we develop that?
I believe we can. I think that we have all of these senses within us. And I think certain things can activate them a little bit more. I think what's important is openness, and also putting your ego aside, putting yourself aside, because effectively as a clairvoyant, psychic medium, all those zones, you are, and a psychopomp, you're
What is that? I was going to ask you.
You're a conduit. Oh yeah, so you're a conduit. So it's not about me. It's not tree. It's not like, I don't have any superpowers or anything. I'm just like I'm just a conduit for something, for a message. So one of the best things to do is approach this from a childlike perspective, one that is egoless. And one thing that's really good before you start a process like this is you just go, and I always say this, I just go, I'm here. I put myself aside. I put all my story, my identity tree, who I am, aside, so that the real stuff can come through. So I think that that's a really good starting point. And in fact, I would say that that's a good foundation for everything moving forward, because it's not about me. It's at all nothing to do with me, really. So that's helpful.
I like that.
Learn it. You can learn this. Definitely. You can definitely learn this. You were going to ask about psychopomp?
Yeah, I've never heard that phrase before. Pump?
So
P-U-M-P?
P-O-M-P, yeah.
P-O-M-P.
Psychopomp. So it's a Greek combination of Greek words from psychos, which is like your soul, the psyche, the soul. And pomp, which is pompos, which is like a sending away, or a leading into. So a psychopomp is like a sort of pathfinder for the souls of the dead. A psychopomp helps for the transition of souls to the afterlife, especially souls that have been, they're confused or they're still around in some kind of way. They need to have a journey. They need a guide. So a psychopomp, it's a very ancient role, and you see it in countless belief systems and cultures all throughout history. So there's psychopomps in ancient Greece, there's psychopomps in ancient Egypt, you see psychopomps in Mexico, Aztec belief system. You also see it in India as well. You see it in the Viking traditions, and also in the Celtic traditions as well. So some psychopomps are already on the other side, and they help. And some psychopomps are here in the earth realms, and you sense, you're able, a psychopomp in the earth realm is able to sense or help souls
Hmm.
who are not transitioned properly. So that's where psychopomps get called in, usually when people say, I feel my loved one around me, they feel like they haven't crossed over properly,
Right.
or I feel that there's a presence in my house, that someone might have passed there and they've not left, they haven't crossed properly. So a psychopomp will connect the soul of the to the soul of the person and let them know, hey, you've died, it's okay, it's all right, but let's get you home and let's connect you to your ancestors for them to come through.
Right.
And so, you're sort of like the, hey, gather them up and bridge them over so they can
Yes.
get home.
So I have talked to others who do that, but they've not used that phrase for themselves, but that's what they're doing. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting word.
Another word, and I know we're running out of time, but there's negative connotations around the word witch. And I would love for you to explain a little bit about that. Enlighten us, teach us.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
it's a hot word. It's a word that really triggers us, or it's a friction word.
right.
And it evokes fear and superstition,
Yes.
and it can feel uncomfortable. And the word witch itself actually is an old English word, Wicca, and Wicca means wise one. And the wise ones were mostly women. There were men too, but it was mostly the wise women of the villages, of the towns. And the word witch really got demonized really in the early modern period, specifically over here in Europe. And of course, it also transcribed over to United States and, Canada as well. And we've got the famous Salem witch trials and whatnot. So at that time, there was a big, reformations going on, and the church became more powerful, and these sort of folky traditions or pagan traditions that were intrinsic to, especially over here in the British Isles, intrinsic to the indigenous people here, of being Celt, of believing in this cosmology of interconnectivity with nature and magic, was just commonplace, and you had your Wicca, you had your wise women. And at that time, they became a big threat to the powers that be. And a lot of manifestos were put out around that time that these women are witches. And so the word Wicca got turned into something really terrible, and associated with Satan and Satanism and evil. And a lot of the texts in these manifestos that came out at this time were deeply misogynist, targeting women. Women are incarnately evil. Even their bodies are evil because they tempt men, and a real proper propaganda against women. And so there was this rise of like women, and women who had held power or held leadership place within the community, and also worked with plants and healing and healed people and worked in magic. And when I say magic, I'm not talking about Harry Potter stuff, and I'm not talking about Satanism or anything like that. This is just healers, healing women, innately part of just this amazing experience, just being part of life. And so the witch trials happened. There was, thousands of people who were tortured and tried and, executed for just being healers. And, up to, 50,000, 60,000 people, in the early modern period, dying this way. A strong percentage, 80% were women, 80%, and they were women over 40. So it was women who were moved into their wisdom years, women who've moved through perimenopause and menopause. And so they were seen as useless, so you can't have kids, you're a hag, you're an old hag, you're a witch.
Right.
It became this deeply misogynist thing. And I just think that that word is, have a collective trauma that we're still working through as women. And we have the hangover of the witch trials of the early modern period that we're still working through. And that's why the word witch is met with such resistance and friction and superstition. And, and I think as women, I think just stepping back into this innately wonderful thing, as women, we're intuitive, we have senses, we are healed. A lot of us are healers, and it's beautiful. And so those are my views of witches.
Yeah, thank you so much. Beautifully put. I've learned so much. We do have to sign off, but before we go, please share anything else that might be on your heart that you might want to share with the listeners. I don't want to cut you off.
I just want to say to the listeners, just be you. There's only
one of you. And that in its own right is deeply magical. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal that that you're here and that you exist. The formation of the universe is incredible. The fact that we came here just through intense heat and like an explosion in its own right is absolutely magical. And so no matter what your belief systems are, you can always go back to that single point of, creation and realize if that's possible, then isn't anything possible? And science backs up the Big Bang Theory. So they support that. They support that anything's possible coming out of nothing. So having said that, open your mind. Don't shut it off. If you're having any experiences, lean into it and move beyond the fear, because fear is just going to be the biggest, obstacle that will keep you stuck in a loop of, confinement or containment. But just, set yourself free, have a good sense of humor about it. Be playful, be like a kid, be open, and check your ego at the door. And, you will be questioning reality left, right, and center. But hey, it's a joyous thing that we're in this thing called the universe. It's like, let's play, right? It's amazing. So lots of love to everybody.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. You're so inspiring. Thank you. Thank you, Carr, for taking this time with me. I've so enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot. And thank you to everyone who's watching. This has been Julie McVeigh with Unordinary Made Ordinary. Hoping you'll join us next time for another fascinating interview. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this type of content, please subscribe and then hit that bell icon so you can be alerted to future videos. And I do hope you are all having a wonderful day or evening wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, Julie.